Hi everyone. In this lecture, I'll be going over how to write references and a reference page according to APA 7th edition. So first, page formatting. So the reference page, which is at the very end of your document, should start with a title. And the title should say references, as you can see in the example on the left here, and it should be written in bold text. Okay, this is something a little new. In the past, it was not in bold with the 6th edition, but now with the 7th edition, it is bold, as you can see. Okay, then your font should be in whatever font you have decided to use for the rest of your document. So in most cases, that's going to be Times New Roman 12-point font. But if you used one of the other accepted fonts, that is okay. Just make sure you use the same font in your reference list. And if you need a reminder of what those accepted fonts are, take a look at the first APA lecture video where I talk about setting up your title page and your document formatting, okay? All right, and then you want to make sure that you have a matching reference for every in-text citation that you use in your paper and the reverse. So every in-text citation should have a reference in the reference page. Okay, one other thing to note, as you can see in the document, is that the reference pages also still have your running head, okay, and your page number. Right, so there's an example, and I'll teach you a little bit more about formatting next with the hanging indent. So the hanging indent is, let me go back just a second, where you can see on that first and second reference that the first line is flush left, and then the second and third and so on lines are indented in with a 0.5 indentation. So what I see a lot of students doing, because they don't know how to format the hanging indent, is that they will write it and then just press return or use space to move those lines over. And first off, that's a lot of extra work that you really don't need to be doing. And second, it inevitably ends up getting messed up because you add things or remove things and it throws off your spacing. So there's an easier way to do this, and it's called the hanging indent. And what you're going to do is after you write your very first reference, you're going to highlight that reference and go to paragraph the same way you would when you're going to do line spacing, okay? And if you're using Word, it's going to pull up this little box here or something similar to it. And if you notice in the second section where it says indentation under special, you can select hanging, okay? That then, as you can see with the example they give you at the bottom, is going to produce that hanging indent where the first line is flush left and the second and so on lines are indented 0.5. Okay, I don't know exactly where you would go to do this on Pages, but on Word, it's going to be in the paragraph section. All right, now here is the basic structure of a reference, and this is for a journal article, which is what you're most likely to be using in this class and moving on. And so we'll focus most heavily on this, and I'll go through every section in this page and then go to a couple of in-depth focus areas afterward. So first you can see highlighted in that yellow color are the author names, and the author names are going to be inverted, meaning that you're going to have last name first instead of first name first. So in this case, last name of the author, comma, and then initials for the first name and the middle initial if they have one. Then you would add a comma. A common error here is to put the initials together without leaving a space in between. So notice that you have a period space, a period comma. So make sure you have that extra space there. Leave the extra space between the initials. The order of the authors is not alphabetical in this case. It goes in order of the order that is used on the article itself. So whichever order they cite the names of the authors is what you're going to copy here. In the next slides, I'll go over how this changes a little bit based on the number of authors, but for now, this is the basic format. Next, you have the year, and the year goes in parentheses. So you would have parentheses, 2020, parentheses, period. And this isn't the year that you accessed it. This is the year that it was published. Okay, make sure you add that period. Next is the title of the article. Okay, there's a difference here. This is the title of the article itself, not the title of the journal, which is the next part. So the title of the article, depression in females or whatever, and that should be written in what's called sentence caps. And so only the first word is the first word is capitalized. So in this case, title is the first word, so it's capitalized. And then the rest of it is lowercase. The only exceptions here are if you have a proper noun. So if it were, for example, depression in women in Argentina, you would capitalize Argentina because that's a proper noun, okay? And then if it's a title that has a period and then a second part to it, a two-part title, then just like with any sentence, you capitalize that first word. Or if there is a colon, depression in women, colon, a case study, you would capitalize the A, right? So it uses the same kind of syntax as a sentence would. And this is written in plain text, not italicized, and ended with a period. Okay, next is the name of the periodical or the journal, and this is italicized. And here we're going to use title caps, meaning that every main word is capitalized. Okay, so you see name and periodical here are capitalized, of the are not. Okay, just the big words. Big words. Okay, you end that with a comma. And then still italicized, you're going to write the volume number. Okay, so 8, for example, you write that italicized. Right next to it, without any space between it, you're going to then have the issue number in parentheses. So if I have my italic 8, I'm then going to have my plain text parentheses 2 parentheses comma. Okay. This also is something a little different from the 6th edition. In the 6th edition, you'd only write the issue number in certain situations, but now in the 7th edition, they're streamlining the process. You're writing the issue number for everything. Okay, comma. And then you end it with your page numbers, the page number for the article, not the journal. So, you know, pages 1-8, period. Okay. The very last thing that goes in your reference is the DOI, which is the Digital Object Identifier, if I'm not mistaken. And most articles will have one for you, and it'll either be written as just the numbers, in which case you'd write lowercase DOI colon the number, or if they have the hyperlink as you have in this example, you would write the hyperlink. And we'll talk more about DOI numbers at the end. Okay, so basic structure. Okay, now we're going to focus in a little bit on author names because there are some differences depending on how many authors are named in the journal article or in the book or what have you. So first, if you have only one author, you're going to write that author's inverted name, so author, comma, a period, with no comma before the year. Okay, so Francis, comma, L period, space, J period, space, parentheses, year, parentheses, period. And then you'd continue with your reference, okay? If there are two authors, you would list both authors with a comma, space, ampersand between them, as you can see in the example. Faye, comma, M, period, comma, space, ampersand, space, and then the next author's name. Okay, it's common to forget the comma before the ampersand, but you need to include a comma. Don't write the word AND, only use the symbol for the ampersand there, okay? And that is that. Now, a big change that has happened with the 7th edition compared to the 6th has to do with when we have more authors. So normally, or in the past, you could go up to, I want to say, 6 or 7 authors and you'd list them all. But now they've extended it. So between 3 and 20 authors, you're going to list all of the authors, okay? And so I have an example here with 3, Foster, comma, J, period, comma, space. Next name, period, comma, space. Oh, and there's an error here, forgive me. There should be an ampersand before that price name. So it should read Coopermink, comma, space, G, period, comma, space, ampersand, space, price, okay? I'll edit this in the version that you get. Sorry about that. Okay, now if we have 21 or more authors, so a whole lot of authors here, they want us to list the first 19 authors, then use an ellipsis and write the last author's name. And here you do not use the ampersand. Okay, so I'm not going to read through all of these authors' names, but you can see that I have 19 author names listed, okay, with last name, comma, space, initial, period, format, Okay, then after I write the 19th author, which in this case is Litma, comma, space, a period, you're going to write comma, ellipses, which are the dot, 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 and then the last author's name, which in this case is Joseph, comma, space, D period. Okay, so there's no ampersand in this case. The ellipses takes the place of the ampersand. All right, and that's what you need to know for referencing with author names, okay? Now, a couple of other things that are more special, more unique. Sometimes you may find that the author has a hyphenated name. And in order to include them in the reference list, you're going to want to retain the hyphen and include a period after initial, but no space, okay? So here's an example and how you would write it. So notice in that you have the period, hyphen, and then the next initial. There's no space. So it's not a period space hyphen space J. It's a period hyphen J period. Okay, so that's the big difference from what we normally will do where we have a space between initials. Here, the hyphen is taking the place of the space. All right, and then the last thing, group authors. Sometimes you'll find reports that are written by groups or by organizations as opposed to by individuals. And so in that case, you're going to use the ampersand without a comma. So in this case, American Psychological Association, space, ampersand, space, National Institutes of Health, period. Don't forget the period, okay? Otherwise, the rules would be the same. Like if you have 21 organizations writing this report, you'd follow the same rules as the 21 or more authors, okay? It's just, the only difference is when you have two, you remove that comma. Okay. All right, next we're going to focus in on title names. And this again is we're looking at the actual article or the actual chapter, not the larger source. Okay, and there are two different rules. The one that you're most likely to use is the one up at the top, which is a work that's part of a larger piece, meaning a journal article or an edited book chapter. It's very rare to reference the entire book because you're saying that you used the book as opposed to a certain chapter in the book. It's more common to reference a specific chapter, so that's this part here on the top. And for all of these, the titles should be written in plain text and sentence caps, just like the example I showed you in the structure of references a couple slides ago. Okay, so here is an example. I've added an extra 0 into the year, ignore that. But the title there, in response to community violence, colon, and then a capital C for coping because of the colon, strategies and involuntary stress responses among Latino, which is capitalized since it's a proper noun, adolescents, period. Okay, so the title is in between periods. You have the period after the parentheses for the year, and then the period at the end of the title name. Okay, and it's in plain text, sentence caps, looking like that. Okay, now works that stand alone, like an entire book, a report, a website, they should be written like this at the bottom. They're italicized and they're also in sentence case. So the only difference here is they're italicized now. Okay, up at the top we have plain text. Up at the down at the bottom we have italics, but otherwise it's the same. It's still in between periods, okay, and still in sentence caps. Those are titles. Now, what about the actual source? So where you got that article from or that book chapter from? We'll start with looking at journals again, which are the most common. They sound complicated, but they're not super complicated. So first, the basic format is you're providing the information, and that includes the title of the journal, the volume number, the issue number, the page range, and the DOI, not the DOT. Sorry about that. Okay, so the journal title, you can see here is International Perspectives in Psychology, and it should be written in italics and in title case. And so title case is where, again, every major word is capitalized. So you can see we've capitalized International Perspectives and Psychology, not in. Okay? And then once you've written the full journal title, you're going to write a comma after that. Next, you would do space and then the volume number. So in this case, it's an 8, and that 8 is also italicized. Next, without a space, you are then adding the issue number in parentheses and plain text. So again, what that would look like is 8 in italics, and then in plain text right next to it without a space, parentheses, 3 parentheses. And then you would add the page numbers, in this case 44 to 56, period, and then the DOI in plain text. Okay, so for the DOI, a couple things to remember. Again, I'll get to where to find that a little bit later, but the DOI number, the actual letters DOI are written in lowercase, not in all caps. Okay, then you have a colon, and then there's no space between the colon and the number. So it's DOI colon 10.10 and so on. If you don't have the DOI number and you just have the hyperlink, you would write the hyperlink. There's no period after the DOI number or the hyperlink. All right, next, we have the basic structure of a chapter in an edited book. Okay, so most things here are similar or exactly the same with what we saw with a journal. The difference is that we're adding editor information about the book itself. Okay, so you see the top part with the authors is the same. The year is basically the same, except it's the copyright year instead of the publication year, but they're basically the same. The title of the book chapter is the same as writing the title of the article. It's sentence caps, plain text between periods. And here's where things get slightly different. Whereas normally we'd then write the name of the journal itself in italics. Here we're going to write the names of the editors. So we're going to add in the words in, I-N, capital I, lowercase n, space, and then the editor names. And the editor names are not written in inverse. They're written not inverted. So first initial, middle initial, and then last name, okay? And you still have the spaces between the initials like we do in the author names. So in this case, A period space, A period space, last name editor, right? Space, ampersand, and then the next person's name. And then you would add in the words EDS, or the letters EDS, period, parentheses, comma. If there's only one editor, you would write ED, period, parentheses, comma. And I'll show you that in the next slide. So that's the first main difference. Then we have the title of the book itself, which you can think of as the title of the journal article, or sorry, the title of the journal in the previous examples. And then we provide the edition and the page numbers. So this is the second big difference here. We're providing an edition, if it has one, and then the pages. But unlike in the journal ones where we just write the page range, here we're actually adding in the PP period and then writing the page numbers. Okay. You end that with a period, and then you write the publisher's name, period, and the DOI or the URL. Okay. Big change from the 6th edition, you are no longer writing the location of the publisher. So in the past, you would write the publisher's name like ABC Publishing, and then you do colon, space, and then where they're located, like New York or whatever. Okay, but that's no longer needed. Okay, I'm going to focus in a little bit here on some things with the book chapters. So first, if there's only one editor, as I mentioned, you're going to write ED period, period, parentheses, comma, sorry, that should be a comma, which you can see back here. It should be a comma, sorry about that. If there are 2 or more editors, you're going to follow the final editor's name with EDS period, parentheses, comma, okay, comma, as you saw in the previous example. Okay, and then you write the title of the book in italics, the edition, the page numbers, and then the publisher. Okay, so this is just breaking down a little bit of what you see in the previous slide, but everything is the same. All right, so it's book chapters. Next, we have the digital object identifier, the DOI. I just wanted to show you where to find it and explain kind of what it is. So the purpose of the DOIs is to help you find the content, and it's a permanent link to that location where you can find the content. So basically to help folks that are doing research find articles more quickly and make sure that they're finding the right ones, okay? This is typically going to be written on the first page of the article. So in the example you see here, it's on the top right, and there's the hyperlink for it, okay? And you'll either see the hyperlink or you'll see just the numbers, okay? If they're written in numbers, they begin with the number 10, okay? And they usually contain a prefix and a suffix separated by a slash, okay? And so you can see that on the second example at the bottom where it says digital object identifier, and you just see that number. So if for some reason you can't find the DOI on the first page of the article, sometimes in the citation that's provided using your research database, like your EBSCOhost or whatever it is that you're using, you can find it listed there. If you scroll down enough, or if you look at citation, it'll produce this for you. Okay? If you're having trouble finding them, I'd be happy to help you. All right. The last thing that you need to be mindful of here is the order of the references. So it's highly likely that you're going to have more than one reference in your paper, and you need to put them in order in the reference page. And the way that's done is by last name, by author last name. So it goes in alphabetical order by last name. And so for example, Abigail, if the last name, is going to go before banana as the second last name, okay? The other thing that you may encounter is if you have the same last name, so in the example here it's Smith, but then there are different numbers of authors. So you would go with single author sources first, and then double author, and then triple, and so on. So single, and it goes in that way if it's the same last name. If you have two authors' names that are similarly spelled, you would want to put the shorter one before the longer one, so nothing precedes something. So in this case, loft is going to go before loftus. If you have the same author but a different year, so it's the exact same person, but they have published at different times, you're going to list in chronological order starting with the earliest. So you would write it like this, with in-press articles going last. Okay. All right, and so that is it for the reference explanation on how to write these. You're going to have a chance to practice these in class, and you'll get a lot of feedback on them in your drafts of your paper. They're the kind of thing that just get easier with practice and are going to feel very cumbersome and challenging at first. So be patient with yourselves and you will learn how to do it. I would recommend that you pull up that basic structure infographic that breaks down everything. It's like the second or third slide, and use that as you're writing your reference and just kind of going back and forth to make sure that you get them correct until you become more comfortable with them and you kind of memorize the structure on your own. All right, but we'll discuss more in class. Thank you for listening.